Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. It's obviously bedtime, and I'm obvious. I'm glad to see you all here, ready and waiting, and eager for the story time to begin. How is everyone doing today? Super talkative, I see. Just a moment. Hello, Carol. Nice to see you here. Not sure I've seen you in chat yet, but welcome. Vela, good to see you. Hello, little dude. I hope you are keeping up with school. I hear you have a special day coming up and you're super eager for it. And I am doing well. The burn did not actually blister. There's just a small red patch where it was, and the pain is largely gone. So not nearly as much damage as it could have been. For those of you who weren't around for the stream yesterday, I managed to scald myself with my tea. The tea bag came flipping out of the mug and landed on my arm and soaked through the pullover I was wearing. Yeah, badness ensued. Few few words I probably shouldn't say on the stream unless I'm going to change it to a mature stream. But I hope you will all forgive me for that. We had a good time reading Conan. It's nice, chewy sentences to get through there. One of the things I like about that author. But yeah, not too bad. Kana continues to argue with me. She she has upped the ante, as it were. So now, apparently, not only is the middle spot hers, whether I am there or not, but should I be there, and she claims that I'm not allowed to move. She gets very grumpy if I try to roll over or shift in my sleep, and she's laying on top of me trying to keep herself from falling off the bed again. So we're going to have a conversation, me and this puppy. Explain to her exactly whose bed it is and that her getting to sleep on the bed is a privilege. If only she wasn't so adorable. It'd be much, much easier to stick with the stern, this is my bed, if she didn't look at me with the completely adorable face that she has. No, it's my bed. Does not get to find that out. Early updates on the Kana. Oh, speaking of the Discord, Carol, I don't think you're in there yet. You should go ahead and join. There's a Discord link on the page right now. There's one in the chat from Vela, and there's a clickable link down below in the About section on my panels on the Twitch channel. Awesome. Storytime Sonny's been a cool person to get to meet, getting to do all this. If you guys haven't heard of her, she's one of the only two other live Storytime readers that I have found. And it's her and Storytime Alley. And yeah, they they kind of inspire me because they're both ahead of me in this, and I've only been doing this for a month, and seeing that there's an audience and a place to go with this is really awesome. It keeps me from thinking that I'm just talking to the darkness. Not that all of you are the darkness at all. Please don't misunderstand that. I'm beyond grateful to have all of you here hanging out with me and getting to spend couple hours most days of the week doing this. My voice is dark. Yes, I've heard it's like dark chocolate. That was a comment that was made. Admit, when I heard it, I might have blushed just a bit. Tiny bit. Little bit. Minute amount. Chocolate. Indeed. But we are reading Murder on the Links today. Last week we discovered the body of Monsieur Renault, and he was found face down in an open grave on the... well, I suppose I could switch from tea to a Chianti, but I think I'll pass on the main course that he went for. That just doesn't appeal to me. A nice Chianti would be all right, though. He was found face down in an open grave with his wife's letter opener stabbed into his back, though she was presumably at the time tied up after mysterious masked men had hauled him out of his bedroom. So we shall find out a little more about the case and what may or may not have happened to him, and see if we can figure out who is sus and who is not. Yeah. Oh, quick reminder before we go get started, though. To my wonderful and amazing subscribers and patrons, I am going to try to do the first subscriber reading this coming weekend. However, I need to know what you guys want to hear. Currently, what I've heard as potentials are Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and 1984. So, please let me know. Hello, Chandler. Great to see you again. Glad you could make it this time. I haven't talked to you in a while. But yeah, let me know what you want me to read. If you leave it up to me, it's probably going to be a handful of poems by Shel Silverstein and then jump into The Hobbit. Could use a nice adventure story where the good guys triumph and the bad guys perhaps persist into the next story, but at least one bad guy falls. 1984 is an amazing book, but also a little too apropos of the times, I think. But yeah, I need to know that. And those of you absolutely amazing, phenomenal, slightly crazy people who picked up Patreon, please, please, please let me know what it is you'd like for the one-on-one readings this month. I'd like to get those on the schedule before everybody finalizes holiday plans. So please let me know. Carol, thank you so much for the follow. Glad you could make it over here. But without further ado, let's jump into the story. And hey, look at that. We made it through a beginning without the 8-ball picking on me. All right. Grab your tea and settle back. And let's read Chapter 6, The Scene of the Crime. And yes, I'm letting my tea cool down a bit. Between them, the doctor and Monsieur Hotet carried the unconscious woman into the house. The commissary looked after them, shaking his head. Pauvre femme, he murmured to himself. The shock was too much for her. Well, we can do nothing. Now, Monsieur Perrault, shall we visit the place where the crime was committed? If you please, Monsieur Bex. We passed through the house and out by the front door. Perrault had looked up at the staircase in passing and shook his head in a dissatisfied manner. It is incredible to me that the servants heard nothing. The creaking of that staircase, with 3 people descending it, would awaken the dead. It was the middle of the night, remember. They were sound asleep by then. But Poirot continued to shake his head, as though not fully accepting the explanation. On the sweep of the drive, he paused, looking up at the house. What moved them in the first place to try if the front door were open? It was a most unlikely thing that it should be. It was far more probable that they should at once try to force a window. But all the windows on the ground floor are barred with iron shutters, objected the commissary. Poirot pointed to a window on the first floor. That is the window of the bedroom we have just come from, is it not? And see, there is a tree by which it would be the easiest thing in the world to mount. Possibly, admitted the other, but they could not have done so without leaving footprints in the flower bed. I saw the justice of his words. There were 2 large oval flower beds, planted with scarlet geraniums, one each side of the steps leading up to the front door. The tree in question had its roots actually at the back of the bed itself, and it would have been impossible to reach it without stepping on the bed. You see, continued the commissary, owing to the dry weather, no prints would show on the drive or paths, but on the soft mold of the flower bed, it would have been a very different affair. Poirot went close to the bed and studied it attentively. As Bex had said, the mold was perfectly smooth. There was not an indentation on it anywhere. Poirot nodded, as though convinced, and we turned away, but he suddenly darted off and began examining the other flower bed. Monsieur Bex, he called, see here. Here are plenty of traces for you. The commissary joined him and smiled. My dear Monsieur Poirot, those are without doubt the footprints of the gardener's large hobnailed boots. In any case, it would have no importance, since this side we have no tree, and consequently no means of gaining access to the upper story. True, said Poirot, evidently crestfallen. So you think these footprints are of no importance? Not the least in the world. Then, to my utter astonishment, Poirot pronounced these words. I do not agree with you. I have a little idea that these footprints are the most important things we have seen yet. Monsieur Beck said nothing, merely shrugged his shoulders. He was far too courteous to utter his real opinion. Shall we proceed, he asked instead. Certainly. I can investigate this matter of the footprints later, said Poirot cheerfully. Instead of following the drive path down to the gate, Monsieur Bex turned up a path that branched off at right angles. It led, up at a slight incline, round to the right of the house, and was bordered on either side by a kind of shrubbery. Suddenly, it emerged into a little clearing from which one obtained a view of the sea. A seat had been placed there, and not far from it was a rather ramshackle shed. A few steps further on, a neat line of small bushes marked the boundary of the villa grounds. Monsieur Bex pushed his way through these, and we found ourselves on a wide stretch of open downs. I looked round and saw something that filled me with astonishment. Why, this is a golf course, I cried. Bex nodded. The limits are not completed yet, he explained. It is hoped to be able to open them sometime next month. It was some of the men working on them who discovered the body early this morning. I gave a gasp. A little to my left, where for the moment I had overlooked it, was a long, narrow pit, and by it, face downwards, was the body of a man. For a moment my heart gave a terrible leap, and I had a wild fancy that the tragedy had been duplicated. But the commissary dispelled my illusion by moving forward with a sharp exclamation of annoyance. What had my police been about? They had strict orders to allow no one near the place without proper credentials. The man on the ground turned his head over his shoulder. But I have proper credentials, he remarked, and rose slowly to his feet. My dear Monsieur Gerard, cried the commissary, I had no idea that you had arrived even. The examining magistrate has been awaiting you with the utmost impatience. As he spoke, I was scanning the newcomer with the keenest curiosity. The famous detective from the Paris-Surrey was familiar to me by name, and I was extremely interested to see him in the flesh. He was very tall, perhaps about 30 years of age, with auburn hair and mustache, and a military carriage. There was a trace of arrogance in his manner, which showed that he was fully alive to his own importance. Bex introduced us, presenting Poirot as a colleague. A flicker of interest came into the detective's eye. "Well, so our friend Poirot has a rival this time around." "I know you by name, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "You cut quite a figure in the old days, didn't you? But methods are very different now." "Crimes, though, are very much the same," remarked Poirot gently. I saw at once that Gerard was prepared to be hostile. He resented the other being associated with him, and I felt that if he came across any clue of importance, he would be more than likely to keep it to himself. "The examining magistrate," began Bex again, but Gerard interrupted him rudely. "A fig for the examining magistrate. The light is the important thing. For all practical purposes, it will be gone in another half-hour or so. I know all about the case, and the people at the house will do very well until tomorrow. But if we're going to find a clue to the murderers, here is the spot we shall find it. Is it your police who have been trampling all over the place? I thought they knew better nowadays." "Assuredly they do. The marks you complain of were made by the workmen who discovered the body." The other grunted disgustedly. "I can see the tracks where the three of them came through the hedge, but they were cunning. You can just recognize the center footmarks of those of Monsieur Renault, but those on either side have been carefully obliterated. Not that there would really be much to see anyway on this hard ground, but they weren't taking any chances." "The external sign," said Poirot. "That is what you seek, eh?" The other detective stared. "Of course." A very faint smile came to Poirot's lips. He seemed about to speak, but checked himself. He bent down to where a spade was lying. "That's what the grave was dug with, right enough," said Gerard. "But you'll get nothing from it. It was Renault's own spade, and the man who used it wore gloves. Here they are." He gesticulated with his foot to where two soiled earth-stained gloves were lying. "And they're Renault's, too, or at least his gardener's. I tell you, the men who planned out this crime were taking no chances. The man was stabbed with his own dagger, and would have been buried by his own spade. They counted on leaving no traces. Hey, Chandler, thank you so much for the host. But I'll beat them. There's always something, and I mean to find it." But Poirot was now apparently interested in something else. A short, discolored piece of lead piping which lay beside the spade. He touched it delicately with his finger. "And does this, too, belong to the murdered man?" he asked, and I thought I detected a subtle flavor of irony in the question. Gerard shrugged his shoulders to indicate that he neither knew nor cared. "May have been lying around here for weeks. Anyway, it doesn't interest me." "I, on the contrary, find it very interesting," said Poirot sweetly. I guessed that he was merely bent on annoying the Paris detective, and if so, he succeeded. The other turned away rudely, remarking that he had no time to waste, and bending down, he resumed his minute search of the ground. Meanwhile, Poirot, as though struck by a sudden idea, stepped back over the boundary and tried the door of the little shed. "That's locked," said Gerard over his shoulder. "But it's only a place where the gardener keeps his rubbish. The spade didn't come from there, but from the tool shed up by the house." "Marvelous," murmured Monsieur Bex to me ecstatically. "He has been here but half an hour, and he already knows everything. What a man! Undoubtedly, Gerard is the greatest detective alive today." Although I disliked the detective heartily, I nevertheless was secretly impressed. Efficiency seemed to radiate from the man. I could not help feeling that, so far, Poirot had not greatly distinguished himself, and it vexed me. You know, you'd really think Hastings at this point would have more faith in Poirot. He seemed to be directing his attention to all sorts of silly, puerile points that had nothing to do with the case. Indeed, at this juncture he suddenly asked, "Monsieur Bex, tell me, I pray you, the meaning of this whitewashed line that extends all round the grave? Is it a device of the police? No, Monsieur Perrault. It is an affair of the golf course. It shows that there is here to be a bunker, as you call it. A bunker? Perrault turned to me. That is the irregular hole filled with sand and a bank at one side, is it not? I concurred. You do not play the golf, Monsieur Perrault? Inquired Bex. I? Never. What a game! He became excited. Figure to yourself. Each hole, it is of a different length. The obstacles, they are not arranged mathematically. Even the greens are frequently up one side. There's only one pleasing thing. How do you call them? Tee boxes. They, at least, are symmetrical. That is possibly the most Perrault thing you said yet. I could not refrain from a laugh at the way the game appeared to Perrault, and my little friend smiled at me affectionately, bearing no malice. Then he asked, But, Monsieur Renault, without doubt he played the golf. Yes, he was a keen golfer. It's mainly owing to him and to his large subscriptions that this work is being carried forward. He even had a say in the designing of it. Perrault nodded thoughtfully. Then he remarked, It was not a very good choice they made of a spot to bury the body. When the men began to dig up the ground, all would have been discovered. Exactly, cried Gerard triumphantly. And that proves that they were strangers to the place. It's an excellent piece of indirect evidence. Yes, said Perrault doubtfully. No one who knew would bury a body there, unless they wanted it to be discovered. And that is clearly absurd, is it not? Gerard did not even trouble to reply. Yes, said Perrault, in a somewhat dissatisfied voice. Yes. Undoubtedly. Absurd. Chapter 7. These are much shorter chapters than the previous novel. The mysterious Madame d'Abril. As we retraced our steps to the house, Monsieur Bex excused himself for leaving us, explaining that he must immediately acquaint the examining magistrate with the fact of Gerard's arrival. Gerard himself had been obviously delighted when Perrault declared that he had seen all he wanted. The last thing we observed as we left the spot was Gerard crawling about on all fours with a thoroughness in his search that I could not but admire. Perrault guessed my thoughts, for as soon as we were alone, he remarked ironically, At last you have seen the detective you admire, the human foxhound. Is it not so, my friend? At any rate, he's doing something, I said, with asperity. If there's anything to find, he'll find it. Now you... Eh bien, I also have found something. A piece of lead piping. Nonsense, Perrault. You know very well that's got nothing to do with it. I meant little things, traces that may lead us infallibly to the murderers. Mon ami, a clue of 2 feet long is every bit as valuable as one measuring 2 millimeters. But it is the romantic idea that all important clues must be infinitesimal. As to the piece of lead piping having nothing to do with the crime, you say that because Gerard told you so. No, as I was about to interpose a question, we will say no more. Leave Gerard to his search, and me to my ideas. The case seems straightforward enough, and yet, mon ami, I am not satisfied. And do you know why? Because of the wristwatch that is 2 hours fast. And then there are several curious little points that do not seem to fit in. For instance, if the object of the murderers was revenge, why did they not stab Renault in his sleep and have done with it? They wanted the secret, I reminded him. Perrault brushed a speck of dust from his sleeve with a dissatisfied air. Well, where is this secret? Presumably some distance away, since they wish him to dress himself. Yet he is found murdered close at hand, almost within earshot of the house. Then again, it is pure chance that a weapon such as the dagger should be lying about casually, ready to hand. He paused, frowning, and then went on. Why did the servants hear nothing? Were they drugged? Was there an accomplice, and did that accomplice see to it that the front door should remain open? I wonder if... He stopped abruptly. We had reached the drive in front of the house. Suddenly, he turned to me. My friend, I am about to surprise you. To please you, I have taken your reproaches to heart. We will examine some footprints. Where? In that right-hand bed yonder. Monsieur Bex says they are the footmarks of the gardener. Let us see if that is so. See, he approaches with his wheelbarrow. Indeed, an elderly man was just crossing the drive with a barrow full of seedlings. Perrault called to him, and he set down the barrow and came hobbling toward us. You are going to ask him for one of his boots to compare with the footmarks? I asked breathlessly. My faith in Perrault revived a little. Since he said the footprints in this right-hand bed were important, presumably they were. Exactly, said Perrault. But won't he think it very odd? He will not think about it at all. We could say no more, for the old man had joined us. You want me for something, monsieur? Yes. You have been a gardener here for a long time, haven't you? 24 years, monsieur. And your name is? Augusta, monsieur. I was admiring these magnificent geraniums. They are truly superb. They have been planted long? Some time, monsieur. But of course, to keep the beds looking smart, one must keep bedding out a few new plants, and remove those that are over, besides keeping the old blooms well picked off. You put in some new plants yesterday, didn't you? Those in the middle there, and in the other bed also? Monsieur has a sharp eye. It takes always a day or so for them to pick up. Yes, I put 10 new plants in each bed last night. As monsieur doubtless knows, one should not put in plants when the sun is hot. Augusta was charmed with Perrault's interest, and was quite inclined to be garrulous. That is a splendid specimen there, said Perrault, pointing. Might I perhaps have a cutting of it? But certainly, monsieur. The old fellow stepped into the bed, and carefully took a slip from the plant Perrault had admired. Perrault was profuse in his thanks, and Augusta departed to his barrow. You see, said Perrault with a smile, as he bent over the bed to examine the indentation of the gardener's hobnailed boot. It is quite simple. I did not realize that the foot would be inside the boot. You do not use your excellent mental capacity sufficiently. Well, what are the footmarks? I examined the bed carefully. All the footmarks in the bed were made by the same boot, I said at length after a careful study. You think so? Eh bien, I agree with you, said Perrault. He seemed quite uninterested, and as though he were thinking of something else. At any rate, I remarked, you will have 1 bee less in your bonnet now. Mon Dieu! But what an idiom! What does it mean? What I meant was that now you will give up your interest in these footmarks. But to my surprise, Perrault shook his head. No, no, mon ami. At last I am on the right track. I am still in the dark, but, as I hinted just now to Monsieur Bex, these footmarks are the most important and interesting things in the case. That poor Gerard, I should not be surprised if he took no notice of them whatever. At that moment, the front door opened, and Monsieur Hotet and the commissary came down the steps. Ah, Monsieur Perrault, we were coming to look for you, said the magistrate. It is getting late, but I wish to pay a visit to Madame de Breuil. Without doubt, she will be very much upset by Monsieur Renault's death, and we may be fortunate enough to get a clue from her. The secret that he did not confide to his wife. Is it possible that he may have told it to the woman whose love held him enslaved? We know where our Samsons are weak, don't we? I admired the picturesqueness of Monsieur Hotet's language. I suspected that the examining magistrate was by now thoroughly enjoying his part in the mysterious drama. Is Monsieur Gerard not going to accompany us? Asked Perrault. Monsieur Gerard has shown clearly that he prefers to conduct the case in his own way, said Monsieur Hotet dryly. One could see easily enough that Gerard's cavalier treatment of the examining magistrate had not prejudiced the latter in his favor. We said no more, but fell into line. Perrault walked with the examining magistrate, and the commissary and I followed a few paces behind. There is no doubt that Francois's story is substantially correct, he said, he remarked to me in confidential tone. I have been telephoning headquarters. It seems that 3 times in the last 6 weeks, that is to say, since the arrival of Monsieur Renault at Merlinville, Madame Gabriel has paid a large sum in notes into her banking account. Altogether, the sum totals 200,000 francs. Dear me, I said, considering. That must be something like 4,000 pounds. Precisely. Yes, there can be no doubt that he was absolutely infatuated. But it remains to be seen whether he confided his secret to her. The examining magistrate is hopeful, but I hardly shared his views. During this conversation, we were walking down the lane toward the fork in the road where our car had halted earlier in the afternoon. And in another moment, I realized that the Villa Marguerite, the home of the mysterious Madame de Breuil, was the small house from which the beautiful girl had emerged. She has lived here for many years, said the commissary, nodding his head toward the house. Very quietly, very unobtrusively. She seems to have had no friends or relations other than the acquaintances she made in Merlinsville. She never refers to the past, nor to her husband. One does not even know if he is alive or dead. There's a mystery about her, you comprehend. I nodded, my interest growing. And the daughter, I ventured? A truly beautiful young girl, modest, devout, all that she should be. One pities her, for though she may know nothing of the past, a man who wants to ask her hand in marriage must necessarily inform himself. And then, the commissary shrugged his shoulders cynically. Hey, Biscuit, glad you could make it. Welcome. But it would not be her fault, I cried with rising indignation. No, but what will you? A man is particular about his wife's antecedents. Leaping to the defense of the beautiful again. Mr. Hastings, you do not change, do you? I was prevented from further argument by our arrival at the door. Monsieur Hotet rang the bell. A few minutes elapsed, and then we heard a footfall within, and the door was opened. On the threshold stood my young goddess of that afternoon. When she saw us, the color left her cheeks, leaving her deathly white, and her eyes widened with apprehension. There was no doubt about it. She was afraid. Mademoiselle de Breuil, said Monsieur Hotet, sweeping off his hat, we regret infinitely to disturb you, but the exigencies of the law, you comprehend? My compliments to Madame, your mother, and will she have the goodness to grant me a few moments' interview? For a moment the girl stood motionless. Her left hand was pressed to her side, as though to still the sudden unconquerable agitation of her heart. But she mastered herself and said in a low voice, I will go and see. Please come inside. She entered a room on the left of the hall, and we heard the low murmur of her voice. And then another voice, much the same in timbre, but with a slightly harder inflection behind its mellow roundness, said, But certainly, ask them to enter. In another minute, we were face to face with the mysterious Madame de Breuil. She was not nearly so tall as her daughter, and the rounded curves of her figure had all the grace of full maturity. Her hair, again unlike her daughter's, was dark and parted in the middle in the Madonna style. Her eyes, half hidden by the drooping lids, were blue. There was a dimple in the round chin, and the half-parted lips seemed always to hover on the verge of a mysterious smile. There was something about almost exaggeratedly feminine about her, at once yielding and seductive. Though very well preserved, she was certainly no longer young, but her charm was of the quality which is independent of age. Standing there, in her black dress, with the fresh white collar and cuffs, her hands clasped together, she looked subtly appealing and helpless. You wish to see me, monsieur? She asked. Yes, madame. Monsieur Hotet cleared his throat. I am investigating the death of Monsieur Renault. You have heard of it, no doubt? She bowed her head without speaking. Her expression did not change. We came to ask you whether you can throw any light upon the circumstances surrounding it. I? The surprise of her tone was excellent. Yes, madame. It would perhaps be better if we could speak to you alone. He looked meaningly in the direction of the girl. Madame de Briolle turned to her. Martha, dear. But the girl shook her head. No, maman. I will not go. I am not a child. I am 22. I shall not go. Madame de Briolle turned back to the examining magistrate. You see, monsieur, I should prefer not to speak before Mademoiselle de Briolle. As my daughter says, she is not a child. For a moment, the magistrate hesitated, baffled. Very well, madame, he said at last. Have it your own way. We have reason to believe that you were in the habit of visiting the dead man at his villa in the evenings. Is that so? The color rose in the lady's pale cheeks, but she replied quietly, I deny your right to ask me such a question. Madame, we are investigating a murder. Well, what of it? I had nothing to do with the murder. Madame, we do not say that for a moment. But you knew the dead man well. Did he ever confide in you as to any danger that threatened him? Never. Did he ever mention his life in Santiago and any enemies he may have made there? No. Then you can give us no help at all? I fear not. I really do not see why you should come to me. Cannot his wife tell you what you want to know? Her voice held a slender inflection of irony. Madame Renault has told us all she can. Ah, said Madame de Briolle, I wonder. You wonder what, madame? Nothing. The examining magistrate looked at her. He was aware that he was fighting a duel, and that he had no mean antagonist. You persist in your statement that Monsieur Renault confided nothing in you. Sorry, I had to cough. Why should you think it likely that he should confide in me? Because, madame, said Monsieur Hotet with calculated brutality, a man tells to his mistress what he does not always tell to his wife. Ah, she sprang forward. Her eyes flashed fire. Monsieur, you insult me, and before my daughter. I can tell you nothing. Have the goodness to leave my house. The honors undoubtedly rested with the lady. We left the Villa Marguerite like a shamefaced pack of schoolboys. The magistrate muttered angry ejaculations to himself. Perrault seemed lost in thought. Suddenly, he came out of his reverie with a start, and inquired of Monsieur Hotet if there was a good hotel near at hand. There's a small place, the Hotel des Bains, on this side of town, a few 100 yards down the road. It will be handy for your investigations. We shall see you in the morning then, I presume? Yes, I thank you, Monsieur Hotet. With mutual civilities, we parted company, Perrault and I going towards Morlinville, and the others returning to the Villa Genevieve. The French police system is very marvelous, said Perrault, looking after them. The information they possess about everyone's life, down to the most commonplace detail, is extraordinary. Though he has only been here a little over 6 weeks, they are perfectly well acquainted with Monsieur Renault's tastes and pursuits, and at a moment's notice they can produce information as to Madame de Briolle's banking account, and the sums that have lately been paid in. Undoubtedly, the dossier is a great institution. But what is that? He turned sharply. A figure was running hatless down the road after us. It was Martha de Briolle. I beg your pardon, she cried breathlessly as she reached us. I should not do this, I know. You must not tell my mother. But it is true, what the people say, that Monsieur Renault called in a detective before he died, and that you are he? Yes, mademoiselle, said Perrault gently. It is quite true. But how did you learn it? Francois told our Amélie, explained Martha with a blush. Perrault made a grimace. The secrecy. It is impossible in an affair of this kind. Not that it matters. Well, mademoiselle, what is it you want to know? The girl hesitated. She seemed longing, yet fearing to speak. At last, almost in a whisper, All right, Biscuits, I hope you make it back to join us after a bit, but thank you for coming and hanging out with us. I'll have the recording up on YouTube after the stream, and of course it'll be on Twitch as well. if you want to catch what you miss. At last, almost in a whisper, she asked, "Is anyone suspected?" Poirot eyed her keenly. Then he replied evasively, "Suspicion is in the air at present, mademoiselle." "Yes, I know, but anyone in particular? Why do you want to know?" The girl seemed frightened by the question. All at once, Poirot's words about her earlier in the day recurred to me. The girl with the anxious eyes. "Monsieur Renault was always very kind to me," she replied at last. "It is natural that I should be interested." "I see," said Poirot. "Well, mademoiselle, suspicion at present is hovering around 2 persons." "Two?" I could have sworn there was a note of surprise and relief in her voice. "Their names are unknown, but they are presumed to be Chileans from Santiago. And now, mademoiselle, you see what comes of being young and beautiful. I have betrayed professional secrets for you." The girl laughed merrily, and then rather shyly she thanked him. "I must run back now. Maman will miss me." And she turned and ran back up the road, looking like a modern Atalanta. I stared after her. "Mon ami," said Poirot, in his gentle, ironical voice, "is it that we are to remain planted here all night, just because you have seen a beautiful young woman, and your head is in a whirl?" I laughed and apologized. "But she is beautiful, Poirot. Anyone might be excused for being bowled over by her." Poirot groaned. "Mon Dieu, but it is that you have the susceptible heart." "Poirot," I said, "do you remember after the Styles case, when you were in love with 2 charming women at once, and neither of them were for you?" "Yes, I remember." Wow, Poirot is savage. "You consoled me by saying that perhaps some day we should hunt together again, and that then, eh bien? Well, we are hunting together, and—" I paused and laughed rather self-consciously. But to my surprise, Poirot shook his head very earnestly. "Ah, mon ami, do not set your heart on Martha de Breuil. She is not for you, that one. Take it from Papa Poirot." "Why," I cried, "the commissary assured me that she was as good as she is beautiful. A perfect angel." "Some of the greatest criminals I have known had the faces of angels," remarked Poirot cheerfully. "A malformation of the gray cells may coincide quite easily with the face of a Madonna." "Poirot," I cried, horrified, "you cannot mean that you suspect an innocent child like this?" "Tut, tut, tut, do not excite yourself. I have not said that I suspected her. But you must admit that her anxiety to know about the case is somewhat unusual." "For once, I see further than you do," I said. "Her anxiety is not for herself, but for her mother." "My friend," said Poirot, "as usual, you see nothing at all. Madame de Breuil is very well able to look after herself without her daughter worrying about her. I admit I was teasing you just now, but all the same, I repeat what I said before. Do not set your heart on that girl. She is not for you. I, Hercule Poirot, know it. Sacré, if only I could remember where I had seen that face." "What face?" I asked, surprised. "The daughter's?" "No, the mother's." Noting my surprise, he nodded emphatically. "But yes, it is as I tell you. It was a long time ago, when I was still with the police in Belgium. I have never actually seen the woman before, but I have seen her picture, and in connection with some case. I rather fancy— yes, I may be mistaken, but I rather fancy that it was a murder case." Ruh-roh. So Madame de Breuil may have been involved in a murder before. Chapter 8. Man, Styles, we had 13 chapters for the whole book, and now we're only 30% through, and we're at chapter 8 already. The author clearly changed her habit with chapter length. We were up at the villa betimes next morning. The man on guard at the gate did not bar our way this time. Instead, he respectfully saluted us, and we passed on to the house. The maid Linny was just coming down the stairs, and seemed not averse to the prospect of a little conversation. Perrault inquired after the health of Monsieur Renault, Mrs. Renault. Linny shook her head. She is terribly upset, la pauvre dame. She will eat nothing, but nothing, and she is as pale as a ghost. It is heartrending to see her. Ah, par exemple, it was not I who would grieve like that for a man who had deceived me with another woman. Perrault nodded sympathetically. What you say is very just, but what will you? The heart of a woman who loves will forgive many blows. Still, undoubtedly there must have been many scenes of recrimination between them in the last few months. Again Linny shook her head. Never, monsieur. Never have I heard Madame utter a word of protest, of reproach even. She had the temper and disposition of an angel, quite different to monsieur. Monsieur Renault had not the temper of an angel? Far from it. When he enraged himself, the whole house knew of it. The day that he quarrelled with Monsieur Jacques, ma foi, they might have been heard in the marketplace, they shouted so loud. Indeed, said Perrault. And when did this quarrel take place? Oh, it was just before Monsieur Jacques went to Paris. Almost he missed his train. He came out of the library and caught up his bag which he had left in the hall. The automobile was being repaired, and he had to run for the station. I was dusting the salon, and I saw him pass, and his face was white with 2 burning spots of red. Ah, but he was angry. Linny was enjoying her narrative thoroughly. And the dispute, what was it about? Ah, that I do not know, confessed Linny. It is true that they shouted, but their voices were so loud and high, and they spoke so fast, that only one well acquainted with English could have comprehended. But monsieur, he was like a thundercloud all day. Impossible to please him. The sound of a door shutting upstairs cut short Linny's loquacity. And Francois, who awaits me, she exclaimed, awakening to a tardy remembrance of her duties. That old one, she always scolds. One moment, mademoiselle. The examining magistrate, where is he? They have gone out to look at the automobile in the garage. Monsieur the commissary had some idea that it might have been used on the night of the murder. Que dit, murmured Perrault, as the girl disappeared. You will go out and join them? No. I shall await their return in the salon. It is cool there on this hot morning. This placid way of taking things did not quite commend itself to me. If you don't mind, I said, and hesitated. Not in the least. You wish to investigate in your own account, eh? Well, I'd rather like to have a look at Gerard, if he's anywhere about, and see what he is up to. The human foxhound, murmured Perrault, as he leaned back in a comfortable chair and closed his eyes. By all means, my friend. Au revoir. I strolled out the front door. It was certainly hot. I turned up the path we had taken the day before. I had a mind to study the scene of the crime myself. I did not go directly to the spot, however, but turned aside into the bushes, so as to come out on the links some 100 yards or so further to the right. If Gerard were still on the spot, I wanted to observe his methods before he knew of my presence. But the shrubbery here was much denser, and I had quite a struggle to force my way through. When I emerged at last on the course, it was quite unexpectedly, and with such vigor that I cannoned heavily into a young lady who had been standing with her back to the plantation. She not unnaturally gave a surprised shriek, but I too uttered an exclamation of surprise, for it was my friend of the train, Cinderella. The surprise was mutual. You, we both exclaimed simultaneously. The young lady recovered herself first. My only aunt, she exclaimed. What are you doing here? For the matter of that, what are you? I retorted. When last I saw you, the day before yesterday, you were trotting home to England like a good little boy. Have they given you a season ticket to and fro on the strength of your MP? I ignored the end of the speech. When last I saw you, I said, you were trotting home with your sister like a good little girl. By the way, how is your sister? A flash of white teeth rewarded me. How kind of you to ask. My sister is well, thank you. She is here with you? She remained in town, said the minx with dignity. I don't believe you've got a sister, I laughed. If you have, her name is Harris. Do you remember mine? She asked with a smile. Cinderella. But you're going to tell me the real one now, aren't you? She shook her head with a wicked look. Not even why you're here? Oh, that. I suppose you've heard of members of my profession resting at expensive French watering places. Dirt cheap if you know where to go. I eyed her keenly. Still, you'd no intention of coming here when I met you 2 days ago. We all have our disappointments, said Miss Cinderella sententiously. There now, I've told you quite as much as is good for you. Little boys should not be inquisitive. You've not yet told me what you are doing here. Got the MP in tow, I suppose. Doing the gay boy on the beach. By the way, that does not mean what you might think it means. Gay in this context is happy. Just to clarify. I shook my head. Guess again. You remember my telling you that my great friend was a detective? Yes. And perhaps you've heard about this crime at the Villa Genevieve? She stared at me. Her breast heaved and her eyes grew wide and round. You don't mean that you're in on that? I nodded. There was no doubt that I had scored heavily. Her emotion as she regarded me was only too evident. For some few seconds she remained silent, staring at me. Then she nodded her head emphatically. Well, if that doesn't beat the band, tote me round. I want to see all the horrors. What do you mean? What'd I say? Bless the boy, didn't I tell you that I doted on crimes? What do you think I'm imperiling my ankles for in high-heeled shoes over this stubble? I've been nosing round for hours. Tried the front way in, but that old stick-in-the-mud of a French gendarme wasn't taking any. I guess Helen of Troy and Cleopatra and Mary Queen of Scots rolled in one wouldn't cut ice with him. It's a real piece of luck happening on you in this way. Come on, show me all the sights. But look here, wait a minute, I can't. Nobody's allowed in. They're awfully strict. Aren't you and your friend the big bugs? I was loath to relinquish my position of importance. Why are you so keen? I asked weakly. And what is it you want to see? Oh, everything. The place where it happened, and the weapon, and the body, and any fingerprints or interesting things like that. I've never had a chance of being right in on a murder like this before. It'll last me all my life. I turned away sickened. What were women coming to nowadays? The girl's ghoulish excitement nauseated me. I had read of the mobs of women who besieged the law courts when some wretched man was being tried for his life on the capital charge. I had sometimes wondered who these young women were. Now I knew. They were of the likeness of Cinderella, young, yet obsessed with a yearning for morbid excitement. For sensation at any price. She saw an opportunity and an easy mark. For sure. Without regard to any decency or good feeling. The vividness of the girl's beauty had attracted me in spite of myself, yet at heart I retained my first impression of disapproval and dislike. I thought of my mother, long since dead. What would she have said of this strange, modern product of girlhood? The pretty face with the paint and powder, and the ghoulish mind behind. Come off your high horse, said the lady suddenly, and don't give yourself airs. When you got called to this job, did you put your nose in the air and say it was a nasty business, and you wouldn't be mixed up in it? No, but if you'd been here on a holiday, wouldn't you be nosing round just the same as I am? Of course you would. I'm a man, you're a woman. Your idea of a woman is someone who gets on a chair and shrieks if she sees a mouse. That's all prehistoric. But you will show me round, won't you? You see, it might make a big difference to me. Wow, he actually said it. I'm a man, you're a woman. I'm thinking at least a few people in this channel would have slapped him silly. In what way? They're keeping all the reporters out. I might make a big scoop with one of the papers. You don't know how much they pay for a bit of inside stuff. I hesitated. She slipped a small, soft hand into mine. Please, there's a dear. I capitulated. Secretly, I knew that I should rather enjoy the part of the showman. After all, the moral attitude displayed by the girl was none of my business. I was a little nervous as to what the examining magistrate might say, but I reassured myself by the reflection that no harm could possibly be done. We repaired first to the spot where the body had been discovered. A man was on guard there, who saluted respectfully, knowing me by sight, and raised no question as to my companion. Presumably he regarded her as vouched for by me. I explained to Cinderella just how the discovery had been made, and she listened attentively, and sometimes putting an intelligent question. Then we turned our steps in the direction of the villa. I proceeded rather cautiously. For truth to tell, I was not at all anxious to meet anyone. I took the girl through the shrubbery round to the back of the house, where the small shed was. I recollected that yesterday evening, after relocking the door, Monsieur Bex had left the key with the Sergeant de Ville Marchot, in case Monsieur Giraud should require it while we were upstairs. I thought it quite likely that the Surete detective, after using it, had returned it to Marchot again. Leaving the girl out of sight in the shrubbery, I entered the house. Marchot was on duty outside the door of the salon. From within came the murmur of voices. Monsieur desires Hotet? He is within. He is again interrogating Francois. No, I said hastily, I don't want him, but I should very much like the key of the shed outside, if it is not against regulations. But certainly, monsieur. He produced it. Here it is. Monsieur le Juge gave order that all facilities were to be placed at your disposal. You will return it to me when you have finished out there. That is all. Of course. I felt a thrill of satisfaction as I realized that in Marchot's eyes, at least, I ranked equally in importance with Poirot. The girl was waiting for me. She gave an exclamation of delight as she saw the key in my hand. You've got it, then? Of course, I said coolly. All the same, you know, what I'm doing is highly irregular. You've been a perfect duck, and I shan't forget it. Come along. They can't see us from the house, can they? Wait a minute. I arrested her eager advance. I won't stop you if you really wish to go in. But do you? You've seen the grave and the grounds, and you've heard all the details of the affair. Isn't that enough for you? This is going to be gruesome, you know, and unpleasant. She looked at me for a moment, with an expression that I could not quite fathom. Then she laughed. Me for the horrors, she said. Come along. In silence, we arrived at the door to the shed. I opened it, and we passed in. I walked over to the body and gently pulled down the sheet, as Monsieur Bex had done the preceding afternoon. A little gasping sound escaped from the girl's lips, and I turned and looked at her. There was horror on her face now, and those debonair high spirits of hers were quenched utterly. She had not chosen to listen to my advice, and she was punished now for her disregard of it. I felt singularly merciless toward her. She should go through with it now. I turned the corpse gently over. You see, I said, he was stabbed in the back. Her voice was almost soundless. With what? I nodded toward the glass jar. That dagger. Suddenly the girl reeled, and then sank down in a heap. I sprang to her assistance. You are faint. Come out of here. It has been too much for you. Water, she murmured. Quick, water. I left her. Wow. I need a minute. He left this woman that he doesn't know alone with the body, unsupervised, in a murder investigation. I mean, I thought I had a low opinion of Hastings before, but as Perot would say, mon Dieu. I left her and rushed into the house. Fortunately, none of the servants were about, and I was able to secure a glass of water unobserved and add a few drops of brandy from a pocket flask. In a few minutes, I was back again. The girl was lying as I had left her, but a few sips of the brandy and water revived her in a marvelous manner. "Take me out of here. Oh, quickly, quickly," she cried, shuddering. Supporting her with my arm, I led her out into the air, and she pulled the door to behind her. Then she drew a deep breath. "Ah, that's better. Oh, it was horrible. Why did you ever let me go in?" I felt this to be so feminine that I could not forbear a smile. Secretly, I was not dissatisfied with her collapse. It proved that she was not quite so callous as I had thought her. After all, she was little more than a child, and her curiosity had probably been of the unthinking order. He is an idiot. "I did my best to stop you, you know," I said gently. "I suppose you did. Well, goodbye. Look here, you can't start off like that, all alone. You're not fit for it. I insist on accompanying you back to Merlinville." "Nonsense. I'm quite all right now." "Supposing you felt faint again?" "No, I shall come with you." But this she combated with a good deal of energy. In the end, however, I prevailed so far as to be allowed to accompany her to the outskirts of the town. We retraced our steps over our former route, passing the grave again, and making a detour onto the road. Where the first straggling line of shops began, she stopped and held out her hand. "Goodbye, and thank you ever so much for coming with me." "Are you sure you're all right now?" "Quite, thanks. I hope you won't get into any trouble over showing me things." I disclaimed the idea lightly. "Well, goodbye." "Au revoir," I corrected. "If you're staying here, we shall meet again." She flashed a smile at me. "That's so. Au revoir, then." "Wait a second. You haven't told me your address." "Oh, I'm staying at the Hotel du Fer. It's a little place, but quite good. Come and look me up tomorrow." "I will," I said, with perhaps rather unnecessary empressement. I watched her out of sight, then turned and retraced my steps to the villa. I remembered that I had not relocked the door of the shed. Wow, really? Fortunately, no one had noticed the oversight. In turning the key, I removed it and returned it to the Sergeant de Ville. And, as I did so, it came upon me suddenly that though Cinderella had given me her address, I still did not know her name. Alright, and that's the chapter, so let's take a short break. I'm going to refill my tea. If you guys have anything you'd like to ask of 8-Ball. 8-Ball stands ready to stab me in the back again. I'm not sure I'd say he's even bumbling, though. I mean, a bumbling idiot can't help himself. These are thought-out actions, but the thought behind them is wrong. Well, 8-Ball's spot on there. Yep. Not at all a fan of Hastings. I don't like his treatment of women. I don't like his attitude toward Perot. I don't like the... I wouldn't say lack of professionalism because he's an amateur, but the lack of seriousness towards murder investigations of all things. Now, the man disappoints and kind of disgusts me. Did you break the 8-Ball? Oh, no space between the 8 and ball in the command, Vela. right, what do you think, Vela? Are Cinderella and Martha the sisters? Do you think she's lying about the sister? Or is there another option? Do you think it's an unmet character? I kind of feel like at this point, this many chapters in, that we've probably established most of the operative characters in terms of possible suspects. If they were twins, though, I'm not sure that would work because she clearly recognized him on the golf course. And if she was the other sister, then she wouldn't have recognized him even if he recognized her. So I'm not sure I buy that. And there was no opportunity really to swap them out. By the way, if you are hanging here and you have not yet done so, please do click that follow button if you're enjoying the story and story time so you can keep apprised notifications and join the Discord. We hang out there, chat, gives you a chance to connect to the other people in the bedtime community, and sometimes we gather there after stream to game or hang out. Oh, sorry you're going to be lurking, Carol, but glad you joined us. I hope I maintain the standards that Storytime Sunny has set. I know she reads a lot of Agatha Christie. But I'm out of tea, but that's all right. I have not scalded myself this time. Let's get back to the story. Anybody have a last question for 8 Ball before I switch it over? Wow, 8 Ball just does not want to answer your questions today. All right, back to the story. Oh, all good, Carol. I just know she set a standard and I don't want to disappoint. That's all. All right. Chapter 9. Monsieur Gerard finds some clues. In the salon, I found the examining magistrate busily interrogating the old gardener, Auguste. Perrault and the commissary, who were both present, greeted me respectively with a smile and a polite bow. I slipped quietly into a seat. Monsieur Hotet was painstaking and meticulous in the extreme, but did not succeed in eliciting anything of importance. 8 Ball is infecting your desk? What? Sorry, just 1 second. I'm going to take off my hoodie. Oh, you have an 8 Ball on your desk. And it's getting an attitude too? Well, let me know if the 8 Ball on your desk asks you if you have any grapes. All right. The gardening gloves Auguste admitted to be his. He wore them when handling a certain species of primula plant, which was poisonous to some people. He could not say when he had worn them last. Certainly he had not missed them. Where were they kept? Sometimes in one place, sometimes in another. The spade was usually to be found in the small tool shed. Was it locked? Of course it was locked. Where was the key kept? Parbleu, it was in the door, of course. There was nothing of value to steal. Who would have expected a party of bandits, of assassins? Such things did not happen in Madame la Vicomtesse's time. Monsieur Hotet signifying that he had finished with him, the old man withdrew, grumbling to the last. Remembering Perrault's unaccountable insistence on the footprints in the flower beds, I scrutinized him narrowly as he gave his evidence. Either he had nothing to do with the crime, or he was a consummate actor. I mean, seriously, does he not understand yet? The gardener said that he had redone all the beds the evening before, but the bed that gave access to the tree that allowed climbing into the bedroom had no footprints. It was completely clear. How was that possible? Unless somebody had covered it over and covered up the evidence. Anyway. Suddenly, just as he was going out of the door, an idea struck me. Pardon, Monsieur Hotet, I cried, but will you permit me to ask him one question? But certainly, monsieur. Thus encouraged, I turned to Auguste. Where do you keep your boots? Sac à papier, growled the old man. On my feet. Where else? But when you go to bed at night. Under my bed. But who cleans them? Nobody. Why should they be cleaned? It is that I promenade myself on the front like a young man. On Sunday I wear the Sunday boots, bien entendu, but otherwise, he shrugged his shoulder. I shook my head, discouraged. Very well, said the magistrate. We do not advance very much. Undoubtedly we're held up until I get the return cable from Santiago. Has anyone seen Gerard? In verity, that one lacks politeness. I have a very good mind to send for him, and you will not have to send far, Monsieur le Juge. The quiet voice startled us. Gerard was standing outside, looking in through the open window. He leaped lightly into the room and advanced to the table. Here I am, Monsieur le Juge, at your service. Accept my excuses for not presenting myself sooner. Not at all, said the magistrate, rather confused. Of course, I am only a detective, continued the other. I know nothing of interrogatories. Were I conducting one, I should be inclined to do so without an open window. Anyone standing outside can so easily hear all that passes. But no matter. Monsieur Hotet flushed angrily. There was evidently going to be no love lost between the examining magistrate and the detective in charge of the case. They had fallen foul of each other at the start. Perhaps in any event it would have been much the same. To Gerard, all examining magistrates were fools, and to Monsieur Hotet, who took himself very seriously, the casual manner of the Paris detective could not fail to give offense. Eh bien, Monsieur Gerard, said the magistrate rather sharply. Without doubt you have been employing your time to a marvel. You have the names of the assassins for us, have you not? And also the precise spot where they find themselves now. Unmoved by this irony, Gerard replied, I know at least where they have come from. Comment? Gerard took two small objects from his pocket and laid them down on the table. Okay. Sorry, if you remember some of the things Perrault said, you'll crack up about this. We crowded round. The objects were very simple ones. The stub of a cigarette and an unlighted match. The detective wheeled round on Perrault. What do you see there? He asked. There was something almost brutal in his tone. It made my cheeks flush. But Perrault remained unmoved. He shrugged his shoulders. A cigarette end and a match. And what does that tell you? Perrault spread out his hands. It tells me nothing. Ah, said Gerard in a satisfied voice. You haven't made a study of these things. That's not an ordinary match. Not in this country, at least. It's common enough in South America. Luckily, it's unlightened. I mightn't have recognized it otherwise. Evidently, one of the men threw away his cigarette end and lit another, spilling one match out of the box as he did so. "And the other match?" asked Perrault. "Which match?" "The one he did light his cigarette with. You have found that also?" "No. Perhaps you didn't search very thoroughly." "Not search thoroughly?" For a moment it seemed as though the detective was going to break out angrily, but with an effort he controlled himself. "I see you love a joke, Monsieur Perrault. But in any case, match or no match, the cigarette end would be sufficient. It is a South American cigarette with licorice pectoral paper." Perrault bowed. The commissary spoke. "The cigarette end and match might have belonged to Monsieur Renault. Remember, it is only 2 years since he returned from South America." "No," replied the other confidently. "I have already searched among the effects of Monsieur Renault. The cigarettes he smoked and the matches he used are quite different." "You do not think it odd," asked Perrault, "that these strangers should come unprovided with a weapon, with gloves, with a spade, and that they should so conveniently find all these things?" Giraud smiled in a rather superior manner. "Undoubtedly it is strange. Indeed, without the theory that I hold, it would be inexplicable." "Aha!" said Monsieur Hotet. An accomplice within the house." "Or outside it," said Giraud with a peculiar smile. "But someone must have admitted them. We cannot allow that, by an unparalleled piece of good fortune, they found the door ajar for them to walk in." "D'accord, mais la juge. The door was opened for them, but it could just as easily be opened from outside, by someone who possessed a key." "But who did possess a key?" Giraud shrugged his shoulders. "As for that, no one who possesses one is going to admit the fact if they can help it. But several people might have had one. Monsieur Jacques Renault, the son, for instance. It is true that he is on his way to South America, but he might have lost the key, or had it stolen from him. Then there is the gardener. He has been here many years. One of the younger servants may have a lover. It is easy to take an impression of a key and have one cut. There are many possibilities. Then there is another person who, I should judge, is exceedingly likely to have such a thing in her keeping." "Who is that?" "Madame de Breuil," said the detective dryly. "Eh? Eh?" said the magistrate, his face falling a little. "So you have heard about that, have you?" "I hear everything," said Giraud imperturbably. "There is one thing I could swear you have not heard," said Monsieur Hotet, delighted to be able to show superior knowledge. And without more ado, he revealed Words are hard. He retailed the story of the mysterious visitor the night before. He also touched on the check made out to Duveen, and finally handed Giraud the letter signed Bella. Giraud listened in silence, studied the letter attentively, and then handed it back. "All very interesting, Monsieur le Juge, but my theory remains unaffected." "And your theory is?" "For the moment, I prefer not to say. Remember, I am only just beginning my investigations." "Tell me one thing, Monsieur Giraud," said Perrault suddenly. "Your theory allows for the door being opened. It does not explain why it was left open. When they departed, would it not have been natural for them to close it behind them? If a Sergeant de Ville had chanced to come up to the house, as is sometimes done, to see that all is well, they might have been discovered and overtaken almost at once." "Bah! They forgot it. A mistake, I grant you." Then, to my surprise, Perrault uttered almost the same words as he had uttered to Bex the previous evening. "I do not agree with you. The door being left open was the result of either design or necessity, and any theory that does not admit that fact is bound to prove vain." We all regarded the little man with a great deal of astonishment. The confession of ignorance drawn from him over the match end had, I thought, been bound to humiliate him. But here he was self-satisfied as ever, laying down the law to the great Giraud without a tremor. The detective twisted his moustache, eyeing my friend in a somewhat bantering fashion. "You don't agree with me, eh? Well, what strikes you particularly about the case? Let's hear your views." One thing presents itself to me as being significant. Tell me, Monsieur Gerard, does nothing strike you as familiar about this case? Is there nothing it reminds you of? Familiar? Reminds me of? I can't say offhand. I don't think so, though. You are wrong, said Perrault quietly. A crime almost precisely similar has been committed before. When and where? Ah, that, unfortunately, I cannot for the moment remember. But I shall do so. I had hoped you might be able to assist me. Gerard snorted incredulously. There have been many affairs of masked men. I cannot remember the details of them all. These crimes all resemble each other, more or less. There is such a thing as the individual touch. Perrault suddenly assumed his lecturing manner and addressed us collectively. I am speaking to you now of the psychology of crime. Monsieur Gerard knows quite well that each criminal has his particular method, and that the police, when called in to investigate, say, a case of burglary, can often make a shrewd guess at the offender simply by the peculiar method he has employed. Job would tell you the same, Hastings. Man is an unoriginal animal, unoriginal within the law in his daily respectable life, equally unoriginal outside the law. If a man commits a crime, any other crime he commits will resemble it closely. The English murderer who disposed of his wives in succession by drowning them in their baths was a case in point. Had he varied his methods, he might have escaped detection to this day. But he obeyed the common dictates of human nature, arguing that what had once succeeded would succeed again, and he paid the penalty of his lack of originality. And the point of all this, sneered Gerard, that when you have two crimes precisely similar in design and execution, you find the same brain behind them both. I am looking for that brain, Monsieur Gerard, and I shall find it. Here we have a true clue, a psychological clue. You may know all about cigarettes and match ends, Monsieur Gerard, but I, Hercule Poirot, know the mind of man. And the ridiculous little fellow tapped his forehead with emphasis. Gerard remained singularly unimpressed. For your guidance, continued Poirot, I will also advise you of one fact which might fail to be brought to your notice. The wristwatch of Madame Renault on the day following the tragedy had gained 2 hours. It might interest you to examine it. Gerard stared. Perhaps it was in the habit of gaining. As a matter of fact, I'm told it did. Eh bien, then. All the same, 2 hours is a good deal, said Poirot softly. Then there is the matter of the footprints in the flower bed. He nodded his head toward the open window. Gerard took 2 eager strides and looked out. This bed here? Yes, but I see no footprints. No, said Poirot, straightening a little pile of books on a table. There are none. For a moment, an almost murderous rage obscured Gerard's face. He took 2 strides towards his tormentor, but at that moment the salon door was opened, and Marchot announced, Monsieur Stonor, the secretary, has just arrived from England. May he enter? Chapter 10. Gabriel Stonor. The man who entered the room was a striking figure, very tall, with a well-knit athletic frame, and a deeply bronzed face and neck. He dominated the assembly. Even Gerard seemed anemic beside him. When I knew him better, I realized that Gabriel Stonor was quite an unusual personality. English by birth, he had knocked about all over the world. He had shot big game in Africa, traveled in Korea, ranched in California, and traded in the South Sea Islands. He had been secretary to a New York railway magnate, and had spent a year encamped in the desert with a friendly tribe of Arabs. His unerring eye picked out Monsieur Houtet, the examining magistrate in charge of the case. Pleased to meet you, Monsieur le Juge. This is a terrible business. How's Mrs. Renault? Is she bearing up quite fairly well? It must have been an awful shock to her. Terrible, terrible, said Monsieur Houtet. Permit me to introduce Monsieur Bex, our commissary of police, Monsieur Gerard of the Surete. This gentleman is Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Monsieur Renault sent for him, but he arrived too late to do anything to avert the tragedy. A friend of Monsieur Perrault's, Captain Hastings. Stoner looked at Perrault with some interest. Sent for you, did he? You did not know, then, that Monsieur Renault contemplated calling in a detective? Interposed Monsieur Bex. No, I didn't. But it doesn't surprise me a bit. Why? Because the old man was rattled. I don't know what it was all about. He didn't confide in me. We weren't on those terms. But rattled he was, and badly. Said Monsieur Hotet. But you have no notion of the cause? That's what I said, sir. You will pardon me, Monsieur Stoner, but we must begin with a few formalities. Your name? Gabriel Stoner. How long ago was it that you became secretary to Monsieur Renault? About 2 years ago, when he first arrived from South America. I met him through a mutual friend, and he offered me the post. A thundering good boss he was, too. Did he talk to you much about his life in South America? Yes, a good bit. Do you know if he was ever in Santiago? Several times, I believe. He never mentioned any special incident that occurred there, anything that might have provoked some vendetta against him. Never. Did he speak of any secret that he had acquired while sojourning there? No. Did he ever say anything at all about a secret? Not that I can remember, but for all that, there was a mystery about him. I've never heard him speak of his boyhood, for instance, or of any incident prior to his arrival in South America. He was a French-Canadian by birth, I believe, but I've never heard him speak of his life in Canada. He could shut up like a clam if he liked. So, as far as you know, he had no enemies, and you can give us no clue as to any secret to obtain possession of which he might have been murdered. That's so. Monsieur Stoner, have you ever heard the name of Duveen in connection with Monsieur Renault? Duveen. He tried the name over thoughtfully. I don't think I have, and yet it seems familiar. Do you know a lady, a friend of Monsieur Renault's, whose Christian name is Bella? Again, Monsieur Stoner shook his head. Bella Duveen? Is that the full name? It's curious. I'm sure I know it, but for the moment I can't remember in what connection. The magistrate coughed. You understand, Monsieur Stoner, the case is like this. There must be no reservations. You might, perhaps, through a feeling of consideration for Madame Renault, for whom I gather you had a great esteem and affection, you might, enfin, said Monsieur Hotet, getting rather tied up in a sentence. There must absolutely be no reservations. Stoner stared at him, a dawning light of comprehension in his eyes. I don't quite get you, he said gently. Where does Mrs. Renault come in? I have an immense respect and affection for that lady. She's a very wonderful and unusual type. But I don't quite see how my reservations, or otherwise, could affect her. Not if this Bella Duveen should prove to have been something more than a friend to her husband? Ah, said Stoner, I get you now. But I'll bet my bottom dollar that you're wrong. The old man never so much as looked at a petticoat. He just adored his own wife. They were the most devoted couple I know. Monsieur Hotet shook his head gently. Monsieur Stoner, we hold absolute proof. A love letter written by this Bella to Monsieur Renault, accusing him of having tired of her. Moreover, we have further proof that, at the time of his death, he was carrying on an intrigue with a Frenchwoman, a Madame de Brie, who rents the adjoining villa. And this is the man who, according to you, never looked at a petticoat. The secretary's eyes narrowed. Hold on, Monsieur le Juge. You're barking up the wrong tree. I knew Paul Renault. What you've just been saying is utterly impossible. There's some other explanation. The magistrate shrugged his shoulders. What other explanation could there be? What leads you to think it was a love affair? Madame de Brie was in the habit of visiting him here in the evenings. Also, since Monsieur Renault came to Villa Genevieve, Madame de Brie has paid large sums of money into the bank in notes. In all, the amount totals £4,000 of your English money. I guess that's right, said Stoner quietly. I transmitted him those sums at his request. But it wasn't an intrigue. Eh? Mon Dieu, what else could it be? Blackmail, said Stoner sharply, bringing down his hand with a slam on the table. That's what it was. Ah, voilà une idée, cried the magistrate, shaken in spite of himself. Blackmail, repeated Stoner. The old man was being bled, and at a good rate, too. 4,000 in a couple of months. Phew! I told you just now there was a mystery about Renault. Evidently this Madame de Brie knew enough about it to put the screws on. It is possible, the commissary cried excitedly. Decidedly it is possible. Possible, roared Stoner. It is certain. Tell me, have you asked Mrs. Renault about this love affair stunt of yours? No, monsieur. We did not wish to occasion her any distress, if it could reasonably be avoided. Distress? Why, she'd laugh in your face. I tell you, she and Renault were a couple in 100. Ah, that reminds me of another point, said Monsieur Hotet. Did Monsieur Renault take you into his confidence at all as to the dispositions of his will? I know all about it. Took it to the lawyer for him after he'd drawn it out. I can give you the name of his solicitors if you'd want to see it. They've got it there. Quite simple. Half in trust to his wife for her lifetime, the other half to his son. A few legacies. I rather think he left me 1,000. When was this will drawn up? Oh, about a year and a half ago. Would it surprise you very much, Monsieur Stoner, to hear that Monsieur Renault has made another will less than a fortnight ago? Stoner was obviously very much surprised. I had no idea of it. What's it like? The whole of his vast fortune is left unreservedly to his wife. There is no mention of his son. Mr. Stoner gave vent to a prolonged whistle. I call that rather rough on the lad. His mother adores him, of course, but to the world at large it looks rather like a want of confidence on his father's part. It will be rather galling to his pride. Still, it all goes to prove what I told you, that Renault and his wife were on first-rate terms. Quite so, said Monsieur Hotet. It is possible we shall have to revise our ideas on several points. We have, of course, cabled to Santiago, and are expecting a reply from there any minute. In all possibility, everything will then be perfectly clear and straightforward. On the other hand, if your suggestion of blackmail is true, Madame de Brie ought to be able to give us valuable information. Perrault interjected a remark. Monsieur Stoner, the English chauffeur of Masters, had he been long with Monsieur Renault? Over a year? Have you any idea whether he has ever been in South America? I'm quite sure he hasn't. Before coming to Mr. Renault, he had been for many years with some people in Gloucestershire whom I know well. In fact, you can answer for him as being above suspicion. Absolutely. Perrault seemed somewhat crestfallen. Meanwhile, the magistrate had summoned Marchot. My compliments to Madame Renault, and I should be glad to speak to her for a few minutes. Beg her not to disturb herself. I will wait upon her upstairs. Marchot saluted and disappeared. We waited some minutes, and then to our surprise the door opened, and Mrs. Renault, deathly pale in her heavy mourning, entered the room. Monsieur Hotet brought forward a chair, uttering vigorous protestations, and she thanked him with a smile. Stoner was holding one hand of hers in his with an eloquent sympathy. Words evidently failed him. Mrs. Renault turned to Monsieur Hotet. You wish to ask me something, Monsieur le Juge? So they're going to interrogate her in front of unrelated people who aren't, like, police or detectives? Man, come on now. With your permission, madame, I understand your husband was a French-Canadian by birth. Can you tell me anything of his youth or upbringing? She shook her head. My husband was always very reticent about himself, monsieur. He came from the Northwest, I know, but I fancy that he had an unhappy childhood, for he never cared to speak of that time. Our life was lived entirely in the present and the future. Was there any mystery in his past life? Mrs. Renault smiled a little and shook her head. Nothing so romantic, I am sure, Monsieur le Juge. Monsieur Hotet also smiled. True, we must not permit ourselves to get melodramatic. There is one thing more, he hesitated. Stoner broke in impetuously. They've got an extraordinary idea into their heads, Mrs. Renault. They actually fancy that Mr. Renault was carrying on an intrigue with a Madame de Breuil who, it seems, lives next door. The scarlet color flamed into Mrs. Renault's cheeks. She flung her head up, then bit her lip, her face quivering. Stoner stood looking at her in astonishment, but Monsieur Bex leaned forward and said gently, "We regret to cause you pain, madame, but have you any reason to believe that Madame de Breuil was your husband's mistress?" With a sob of anguish, Mrs. Renault buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders heaved convulsively. At last she lifted her head and said brokenly, "She may have been." Never, in all my life, have I seen anything to equal the blank amazement on Stoner's face. He was thoroughly taken aback. All right, I think this will be the last chapter for today. Chapter 11, Jacques Renault. What the next development of the conversation would have been, I cannot say, for at that moment the door was thrown violently open, and a tall young man strode into the room. Just for a moment, I had the uncanny sensation that the dead man had come to life again. Then I realized that this dark head was untouched with gray, and that in point of fact it was a mere boy who now burst in among us with so little ceremony. He went straight to Mrs. Renault, with an impetuosity that took no heed of the presence of others. "Mother! Jack!" With a cry she folded him in her arms. "My dearest, but what brings you here? You were to sail on the Anzora from Cherbourg 2 days ago." Then suddenly recalling to herself the presence of others, she turned with a certain dignity. "My son, messieurs." "Aha," said Monsieur Hotet, acknowledging the young man's bow. "So you did not sail on the Anzora?" "No, monsieur. As I was about to explain, the Anzora was detained 24 hours through engine trouble. I should have sailed last night instead of the night before, but happening to buy an evening paper, I saw it in an account of the awful tragedy that had befallen us." His voice broke, and the tears came into his eyes. "My poor father! My poor, poor father!" Staring at him like one in a dream, Mrs. Renault repeated, "So you did not sail?" And then, with a gesture of infinite weariness, she murmured as though to herself, "After all, it does not matter now." "Sit down, Monsieur Renault, I beg of you," said Monsieur Hotet, indicating a chair. "My sympathy for you is profound. It must have been a terrible shock to you to learn the news you did. However, it is most fortunate that you were prevented from sailing. I am in hopes that you may be able to give us just the information we need to clear up this mystery." "I am at your disposal, Monsieur le Juge. Ask me any questions you please." "To begin with, I understand that this journey was being undertaken at your father's request." "Quite so, Monsieur le Juge. I received a telegram bidding me to proceed without delay to Buenos Aires, and from thence via the Andes to Valparaiso and on to Santiago." "Ah, and the object of this journey?" "I have no idea, Monsieur le Juge." "What?" "No. See, here is the telegram. Proceed immediately to Cherbourg. Embark Anzora, sailing tonight, Buenos Aires. Ultimate destination Santiago. Further instructions will await you, Buenos Aires. Do not fail. Matter is of utmost importance. Renault." "And there had been no previous correspondence on the matter?" Jacques Renault shook his head. "That is the only intimation of any kind. I knew, of course, that my father, having lived so long out there, had necessarily many interests in South America, but he had never mooted any suggestion of sending me out." "You have, of course, been a good deal in South America, Monsieur Renault." "I was there as a child, but I was educated in England and spent most of my holidays in that country, so I really know far less of South America than might be supposed. You see, the war broke out when I was 17. You served in the English Flying Corps, did you not? Yes, Monsieur le Juge. Monsieur Hotet nodded and proceeded with his inquiries along the, by now, well-known lines. In response, Jacques Renault declared definitively that he knew nothing of any enmity his father might have incurred in the city of Santiago, or elsewhere in the South American continent, that he had noticed no change in his father's manner of late, and that he had never heard of him referred to as secret. He had regarded the mission to South America as connected with business interests. As Monsieur Hotet paused for a minute, the quiet voice of Gerard broke in. I should like to put a few questions on my own account, Monsieur le Juge. By all means, Monsieur Gerard, if you wish, said the magistrate coldly. Gerard edged his chair a little nearer to the table. Were you on good terms with your father, Monsieur Renault? Certainly I was, returned the lad haughtily. You assert that positively? Yes. No little disputes, eh? Jack shrugged his shoulders. Everyone may have a different opinion now and then. Quite so, quite so. But if anyone were to assert that you had had a violent quarrel with your father on the eve of your departure for Paris, that person, without doubt, would be lying. I could not but admire the ingenuity of Gerard. His boast, I know everything, had been no idle one. Jacques Renault was clearly disconcerted by the question. We did have an argument, he admitted. Ah, an argument. In the course of that argument, did you use this phrase, when you are dead, I can do as I please? I may have done, muttered the other. I don't know. In response to that, did your father say, but I am not dead yet? To which you responded, I wish you were? The boy made no answer. His hands fiddled nervously with the things on the table in front of him. I must request an answer, please, Monsieur Renault, said Gerard sharply. With an angry exclamation, the boy swept a heavy paper knife onto the floor. What does it matter? You might as well know. Yes, I did quarrel with my father. I dare say I said all those things. I was so angry I cannot even remember what I said. I was furious. I could almost have killed him at that moment. There, make the most of that. He leant back in his chair, flushed and defiant. Gerard smiled, then moving his chair back a little, said, That is all. You would, without doubt, prefer to continue the interrogatory, Monsieur le Juge? Yes, exactly, said Monsieur Hotet. And what was the subject of your quarrel? I decline to state. Monsieur Hotet sat up in his chair. Monsieur Renault, it is not permitted to trifle with the law, he thundered. What was the subject of the quarrel? Young Renault remained silent, his boyish face sullen and overcast. But another voice spoke, imperturbable and calm, the voice of Hercule Poirot. I will inform you, if you like, Monsieur le Juge. You know? Certainly I know. The subject of the quarrel was Mademoiselle Martha de Breuil. Renaud sprang round, startled. The magistrate leaned forward. Is this so, monsieur? Jacques Renaud bowed his head. Yes, he admitted. I love Mademoiselle de Breuil, and I wish to marry her. When I informed my father of the fact, he flew at once into a violent rage. Naturally, I could not stand hearing the girl I loved insulted, and I, too, lost my temper. Think they're brother and sister? Well, half-brother and half-sister? And that's why the dad objected. Would certainly explain the payments, that's for sure. You were aware of this attachment, madame? I feared it, she replied simply. Mother, cried the boy, you too? Martha is as good as she is beautiful. What can you have against her? I have nothing against Mademoiselle de Breuil in any way, but I should prefer you to marry an Englishwoman, or, if a Frenchwoman, not one who has a mother of doubtful antecedents. Her rancor against the older woman showed plainly in her voice, and I could well understand that it must have been a bitter blow to her when her only son showed signs of falling in love with the daughter of her rival. Mrs. Renault continued, addressing the magistrate. I ought, perhaps, to have spoken to my husband on the subject, but I hoped that it was only a boy and girl flirtation, which would blow over all the quicker if no notice was taken of it. I blame myself now for my silence, but my husband, as I told you, had seemed so anxious and careworn, different altogether from his normal self, that I was chiefly concerned not to give him any additional worry. Monsieur Houtet nodded. When you informed your father of your intentions towards Mademoiselle Gabriel, he resumed, he was surprised? He seemed completely taken aback. Then he ordered me peremptorily to dismiss any such idea from my mind. He would never give his consent to such a marriage. Nettled, I demanded what he had against Mademoiselle Gabriel. To that he could give no satisfactory reply, but spoke in slighting terms of the mystery surrounding the lives of the mother and daughter. I answered that I was marrying Martha, and not her antecedents, but he shouted me down with a peremptory refusal to discuss the matter in any way. The whole thing must be given up. The injustice and high-handedness of it all maddened me, especially since he himself always seemed to go out of his way to be attentive to the Gabriels, and was always suggesting that they should be asked to the house. I lost my head, and we quarreled in earnest. My father reminded me that I was entirely dependent on him, and it must have been in answer to that I made the remark about doing as I pleased after his death. Perrault interrupted with a quick question. You were aware, then, of the terms of your father's will? I knew that he had left half his fortune to me, and the other half in trust for my mother to come to me at her death, replied the lad. Proceed with your story, said the magistrate. After that, we shouted at each other in sheer rage, until I suddenly realized I was in danger of missing my train to Paris. I had to run for the station, still in a white heat of fury. However, once well away, I calmed down. I wrote to Martha, telling her what had happened, and her reply soothed me still further. She pointed out to me that we had only to be steadfast, and any opposition was bound to give way at last. Our affection for each other must be tried and proved, and when my parents realized that it was no light infatuation on my part, they would doubtless relent toward us. Of course, to her, I had not dwelt on my father's principal objection to the match. I soon saw that I should do my cause no good by violence. My father wrote me several letters to Paris, affectionate in tone, and which did not refer to our disagreement or its cause, and I replied in the same strain. You can produce those letters, eh? Said Giraud. I did not keep them. No matter, said the detective. Renault looked at him for a moment, but the magistrate was continuing his questions. To pass to another matter, are you acquainted with the name of Duveen, Monsieur Renault? Duveen, said Jack. Duveen? He leant forward and slowly picked up the paper knife he had swept from the table. As he lifted his head, his eyes met the watching ones of Giraud. Duveen. No, I can't say I am. Will you read this letter, Monsieur Renault, and tell me if you have any idea as to who the person who addressed it to your father? Jacques Renault took the letter and read it through, the color mounting in his face as he did so. Addressed to my father? The emotion and indignation in his tones were evident. Yes, we found it in the pocket of his coat. Does... He hesitated, throwing the merest fraction of a glance toward his mother. The magistrate understood. As yet, no. Can you give us any clue as to the writer? I have no idea whatsoever. Monsieur Houtet sighed. A most mysterious case. Ah, well, I suppose we can now rule out the letter altogether. What do you think, Monsieur Giraud? It does not seem to lead us anywhere. It certainly does not, agreed the detective with emphasis. And yet, sighed the magistrate, it promised at the beginning to be such a beautiful and simple case. He caught Mrs. Renault's eye and blushed in immediate confusion. Yes. He coughed, turning over the papers on the table. Let me see, where were we? Oh, the weapon. I fear this may give you pain, Monsieur Renault. I understand it was a present from you to your mother. Very sad, very distressing. Jacques Renault leaned forward. His face, which had flushed during the perusal of the letter, was now deadly white. Do you mean that it was an aeroplane wire paper cutter that my father was killed? But it's impossible. A little thing like that. Alas, Monsieur Renault, it is only too true. An ideal little tool, I fear. Sharp and easy to handle. Where is it? Can I see it? Is it still in the body? Oh no, it had been removed. You would like to see it, to make sure? It would be as well, perhaps, though Madame has already identified it. Still, Monsieur Bex, might I trouble you? Certainly, Monsieur le Juge. I will fetch it immediately. Would it not be better to take Monsieur Renault to the shed? Suggested Gerald smoothly. Without doubt, he would wish to see his father's body. Excuse me. The boy made a shivering gesture of negation, and the magistrate, always disposed to cross Gerald whenever possible, replied, But no, not at present. Monsieur Bex will be so kind as to bring it to us here. Uh-oh. Anybody have a guess at what's about to happen? This will be the first time anybody's gone to the shed since Hastings' misadventure. That's what I think. The commissary left the room. Stoner crossed to Jack and wrung him by the hand. Poirot had risen and was adjusting a pair of candlesticks that struck his trained eye as being a shade askew. The magistrate was reading the mysterious love letter through a last time, clinging desperately to his first theory of jealousy and a stab in the back. Suddenly the door burst open, and the commissary rushed in. Monsieur le Juge! Monsieur le Juge! But yes, what is it? The dagger. It is gone. Comment? Gone? Vanished. Disappeared. The glass jar that contained it is empty. What? I cried. Impossible. Why, only this morning I saw... The words died on my tongue. But the attention of the entire room was diverted to me. What is that you say? Cried the commissary. This morning? I saw it there this morning, I said slowly. About an hour and a half ago, to be accurate. You went to the shed, then? How did you get the key? I asked the sergeant de Ville for it. And you went there? Why? I hesitated, but in the end I decided that the only thing to do was to make a clean breast of it. And Hastings' idiocy is revealed. Or do you think he'll lie to hide it? Monsieur le Juge, I said, I have committed a grave fault for which I must crave your indulgence. Eh bien, proceed, monsieur. The fact of the matter is, I said, wishing myself anywhere else than where I was, that I met a young lady, an acquaintance of mine. She displayed a great desire to see everything that was to be seen, and in short, I took the key to show her the body. Ah, par exemple, cried the magistrate indignantly. But it is a grave fault you have committed there, Captain Hastings. It is altogether most irregular. You should not have permitted yourself this folly. I know, I said meekly. Nothing that you can say could be too severe, Monsieur le Juge. You did not invite this lady to come here? Certainly not. I met her quite by accident. She is an English lady who happens to be staying in Merlinsville, though I was not aware of that until my unexpected meeting with her. Well, well, said the magistrate, softening. It was most irregular, but the lady is without doubt young and beautiful, n'est-ce pas? What it is to be young. Oh, je ne sais, je ne sais. And he sighed sentimentally. But the commissary, less romantic and more practical, took up the tale. But did you not reclose and lock the door when you departed? That's just it, I said slowly. That's what I blame myself for so terribly. My friend was upset at the sight. She nearly fainted. I got her some brandy and water, and afterwards insisted on accompanying her back to town. In the excitement, I forgot to relock the door. I only did so when I got back to the villa. Then for 20 minutes at least, said the commissary slowly. He stopped. Exactly, I said. 20 minutes, mused the commissary. It is deplorable, said Monsieur Hotet, his sternness of manner returning. Without precedent. Suddenly another voice spoke. You find it deplorable, Monsieur le Juge? Asked Gerard. Certainly I do. Eh bien, I found it admirable, said the other imperturbably. This unexpected ally quite bewildered me. Admirable, Monsieur Gerard? Asked the magistrate, studying him cautiously out of the corner of his eye. Precisely. And why? Because we know now that the assassin, or an accomplice of the assassin, has been near the villa only an hour ago. It will be strange if, with that knowledge, we do not shortly lay hands upon him. There was a note of menace in his voice. He continued. He risked a good deal to gain possession of that dagger. Perhaps he feared that fingerprints might be discovered on it. Barreau turned to Bex. You said there were none. Gerard shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps he could not be sure. Hey, story time. Glad to see you. How are you? We are being further disappointed by Captain Hastings at the moment. He not only has head turned by a young woman and showed off the body and the murder weapon to her. He left her unattended there, and then after leaving with her, left the body and the murder weapon unsecured, and the murder weapon was stolen, all due to his carelessness and having his head turned by another pretty girl. Perrault looked at him. You are wrong, Monsieur Giraud. The assassin wore gloves, so he must have been sure. I do not say it was the assassin himself. It may have been an accomplice who was not aware of that fact. Il seulement résigné le complice, muttered Perrault, but he said no more. Sorry if I butchered that. The magistrate's clerk was gathering up the papers on the table. Monsieur Hotet addressed us. Our work here is finished. Perhaps, Monsieur Renault, you will listen whilst your evidence is read over to you. I have purposely kept all the proceedings as informal as possible. I have been called original in my methods, but I maintain that there is much to be said for originality. The case is now in the clever hands of the renowned Monsieur Giraud. He will without doubt distinguish himself. Indeed, I wonder that he has not already laid his hands upon the murderers. Madame, again let me assure you of my heartfelt sympathy. Messieurs, I wish you all good day. And, accompanied by his clerk and the commissary, he took his departure. Perrault tugged out that large turnip of a watch of his, and observed the time. Let us return to the hotel for lunch, my friend, he said, and you shall recount to me in full the indiscretions of this morning. No one is observing us. We need make no adieu. We went quietly out of the room. The examining magistrate had just driven off in his car. I was going down the steps when Perrault's voice arrested me. One little moment, my friend. Dexterously he whipped out his yard measure, and proceeded, quite solemnly, to measure an overcoat hanging in the hall from the collar to the hem. I had not seen it hanging there before, and guessed that it belonged to either Mr. Stoner or Jack Renault. Then, with a little satisfied grunt, Perrault returned the measure to his pocket and followed me out into the open air. And that is where we're going to close for the day, with great disappointment in Captain Hastings. So, what's everyone think so far? Any theories to the crime yet? Oh, hey, Random. Glad you made it for story time. Oh, and hey, we've got 10 people in the chat right now. If all of you type something, we unlock new VIP badges. So, if you guys are willing to unlock this for me, everybody type in one little thing, and it unlocks the building a community achievement, and we get new VIP badges, or at least more of them. I'm not sure which it is, but it requires 10 people to talk and chat at the same time. It's okay if we don't. It doesn't have a huge impact, but it is something at least. I don't know if there's people lurking that might not hear me say something, or if you've stepped away or anything like that. But should you want to. Yeah, it'd have to all be within the same few minutes, I think. I'm not sure what the breakdown is. It doesn't actually say. Oh no, stalker bots. Stalker bots are no fun. Although I think those usually don't actually get counted as viewers. To be honest, I don't think they get counted in the viewer total. I don't know. Maybe it's maybe he looks at him like a pet. I don't know. I am sure there are redeeming qualities there somewhere. Something that he likes about him. Hey, little dude. But yeah, I am fairly appalled by Hastings doesn't really get his quirks though. At best he kind of accepts some of them, but he keeps talking down to Perot, and he keeps like being disgusted by him and going off for somebody else that presents an easy answer, an easy solution. Now, serving as a foil, I would believe. But that's more authorial intent instead of character's preference. Fair enough, a viewpoint character, but again, that's a story mechanic. I'm asking why Perot the character would hang out with Hastings the character. I understand authorial intent and having a viewpoint character and that sort of thing. But what's the draw for the relationship between the characters themselves? I could even see Hastings' character as being a chance to appeal to the ego of the reader, even for the reader to feel smart for spotting things that Hastings doesn't. Sunny's read a few more Perot books than I have, by the way, so she probably has more insight and knowledge than I do on this stuff. I think she's currently reading some Perot short stories. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. Well, I am reading the first two Perot books, so it's Hastings back to back, which is why there's so many callbacks to a ferret styles. One thing I did find interesting with this book so far is the change in the chapter length. Like in a ferret styles, the chapters were incredibly long, but in this one they're actually quite short, especially by comparison. And the pacing has changed up a bit. It's interesting to see the evolution of the author's writing and style when it comes to that stuff. At least I thought so. That might be incredibly boring to everyone else, but I thought it was interesting. Nerd. I mean, I'm live reading stories from 100 years ago online. I think if you were surprised that I'm a nerd, that's perhaps more on you. I'll own it. I've got no problem with that. You think I'm a nerd, do you? Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate the love. Speaking of love, if you have been enjoying it, please do click the follow button. Come join the Discord, hang out, discuss stuff with us, talk about the books that we've been reading. Sometimes we post extra images and stuff like that. If you want to support the stream, we are trying to expand our audience and get more viewers. So please recommend this to friends or family or other people that you think might enjoy it, or other communities you belong to. Right now, we're in the kind of like catch-22 of we need discoverability to get more viewers, but we need more viewers to get discoverability. So Twitch really hasn't quite taken notice of us yet. I mean, I notice you guys, and I love you guys, and I love being able to come here and read to you. And I think it's amazing that this is going as well as it is. But if you want to support the stream, we definitely do need a few more eyeballs. I know I haven't paid Twitch, but I am, bringing people here. Yeah, I try to raid. It's a matter of finding raid targets that you guys would like. So, give me some feedback on frankly, games that you want to see, or other types of channels in the Discord, and I will try to set up more raids and go hunting for more good targets. I suppose there are some art streamers that would be good, right? Would you guys want to raid like some people doing live art and drawing and sculpting and whatnot? Amazon Animal Crossing? Yeah, that's probably a good idea. And my viewer demographic is, oh, you like watching art streams? Okay. My viewer demographic is amazing people. So, there should be a bunch of amazing people out there. Yeah, today is the release date for Cyberpunk. So thank you guys all for coming and hanging out with me and skipping the Cyberpunk stream. I know some of you at least were interested in it. So I do appreciate your time. But I will... All right. Say in chat if you want art or Animal Crossing, and whatever we get more of, I will go looking for, and we'll try out a raid on one of those two topics. And then we shall go hunting. After that, I will pop into the Discord to chat, and if anybody wants to further discuss Hastings and Perot and the case and all that, or about any other little thing that we want to talk about, hop in there. A reminder for my patrons, who there are a couple in here, I need your story selections and an idea of when you would like to set up the one-on-one readings. I am grateful for the support, but I do need to get those on the schedule, please. So please give me an idea and let me know. For subscribers, we are going to do the first subscriber reading, I think most likely next weekend. So there's a couple of suggestions in I think it's in the feedback channel. And if you want to let me know if you want one of the, or the book request channel, my bad, book request channel. If you want to let me know if you want one of those, or if you want to suggest another one. Otherwise, like I said, probably just going to read a few poems from Shel Silverstein, and then jump into The Hobbit for the subscriber reading. But I am open to anything. I mean, I am totally down to read that for the subscriber rating, no problem. I'll read that at bedtime. It's obviously a great bedtime story, right? I'm not sure I can do it the justice that Samuel L. Jackson did. I think he may be the superior narrator when it comes to that particular book. But I will do my best to render it justice. So, all right. I have seen art from two people, so I guess we will go look at an art stream. Question is where I can find that. All right, think it'll be in just chatting? Nope, art. There we go. Art. All right. We want somebody a little smaller, but still interesting, I think. Maybe not the snowman body paint. Well, 71 viewers isn't exactly small, but the art does look interesting. She's painting a magical forest. So why don't we go raid Lady Luna Star, who, by the way, does not appear to be breasting boobily, so don't worry about that, Bella. All right. Raid. Not rad. Raid. Lady Luna Star. All right. This is apparently a mature one, but away we go.